When my daughter-in-law handed me a bouquet with a note that read, "Last flowers before the nursing home," I smiled on the outside, while my heart shattered inside. Stay with me until the end of my story, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. I never imagined a simple bouquet could sting so deeply. But that Mother's Day morning, there I was, Charlotte Wilson, 65 years old, sitting in the third pew of Oak Ridge Community Church, clutching a beautiful arrangement of pink roses and white lilies that suddenly felt like an insult wrapped in ribbon. Heather, my daughter-in-law, had given them to me with her flawless, picture-perfect smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Happy Mother's Day, Charlotte," she said loudly, just enough for the people around us to hear. Everyone nearby smiled and nodded. What a thoughtful daughter-in-law they must have thought. But then I opened the tiny envelope tucked among the blooms. The message inside said, "Last flowers before the nursing home." For a moment I thought I had read it wrong. My hands shook as I read it again. No mistake. Those were the words. Across the aisle, Heather leaned toward my son, William, whispering something, her hand resting on his arm. Then she caught my gaze and smiled sweetly. That smile told me everything. This wasn't a joke. It was a message. For 3 years, Heather had been dropping subtle hints, how hard it must be for me to keep up with the house, how worried she was about me living alone, how sensible it would be to make arrangements early. And William? He always nodded along, never once contradicting her. I folded the note, slid it into my purse, and forced myself to breathe. Pastor Richards was wrapping up his sermon about honoring mothers ironic, considering the note burning a hole in my bag. Families around me leaned close, smiling and whispering kind words. The room was full of love and gratitude, everything my own son and his wife seemed to have forgotten. When the service ended, families were invited to stand and share something they appreciated about their mothers. One by one, people spoke children, grandchildren, their voices full of warmth. But William stayed seated, Heather's hand firmly placed on his knee. Something in me snapped. After a lifetime of staying quiet to keep the peace, I'd finally had enough. "I'd like to say something," I heard myself say. Pastor Richards blinked in surprise but handed me the microphone. My voice was steady. "Thank you for this wonderful service celebrating mothers," I began. "Being a mother has been the greatest joy of my life." I looked straight at my son. He gave me a small, uncertain smile. "But being a mother," I continued, "also means speaking hard truths when it matters." I took a breath. Today, I received these beautiful flowers with a note that said they'd be my last before the nursing home. The congregation gasped. William's face turned pale. "I'm not saying this for sympathy," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I'm saying it because for 3 years, I've watched my daughter-in-law slowly try to pull my son away from me. I've seen her control his finances, his time, even his friendships. And I've stayed silent while she hinted that my memory was failing, even though my doctor says I'm perfectly healthy." Heather's expression twisted. She whispered something sharply to William. I lifted my chin. "I'm not going anywhere, and I won't pretend that cruelty wrapped in politeness is love. Families should lift each other up, not push each other aside." I handed the microphone back to Pastor Richards. The room was silent. Some people avoided my eyes. Others looked at me with quiet respect. As I walked toward the door, I heard Heather's calm, practiced voice behind me. "Oh, she's been so confused lately. This is exactly what we've been worried about." I pushed open the heavy church doors and stepped into the bright May sunlight. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in years, I felt free. The flowers lay forgotten on the pew, their beauty overshadowed by the cruelty they carried. 7 days passed. The phone stayed silent. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold between my hands. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of the house I'd lived in for 3 decades, the same home where I'd raised William after his father passed away. And now, it was the home Heather wanted me out of. A text came from William that night. "You embarrassed us. Heather is hurt. I need space. Space, that's what they call it now when you erase your own mother from your life. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of all those quiet years. Then, slowly, I smiled. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from finally being heard. We used to talk about everything and nothing, his job at the architectural firm, my volunteer work at the library, the latest book we'd both read. There was an ease between us, the kind that comes only from truly knowing someone. Then came Heather, perfectly highlighted hair, polished smile, a marketing executive who always seemed to have the right words. At first, I was happy for William. After the pain of his divorce, he deserved joy again. But the changes came fast. The spontaneous visits stopped. Every meeting had to be scheduled through Heather. Then came the missed birthdays, the shortened holiday dinners, the polite excuses whenever I asked to see William alone. Little by little, my son turned into a polite stranger who looked like the boy I'd raised. "You're smothering him," Heather had said once, her voice dripping with sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "He has his own life now. You should find one too." The words echoed in my quiet kitchen. The clock ticked loudly, marking the seconds of a silence that felt endless. I wanted to be angry. Instead, all I felt was an aching sadness, a hollow space inside me that nothing seemed to fill. Then the doorbell rang. For a heartbeat, my heart lifted. Maybe it's William. But when I opened the door, it was Margaret Collins from church, clutching a casserole dish. "I thought you might need this," she said softly. "Chicken and wild rice." "Thank you, Margaret," I said, accepting it. "Would you like to come in?" She hesitated, glancing at her car. "I wish I could, but I have a book club meeting." I knew she was lying. The book club met on Thursdays, not Tuesdays. But I nodded anyway. People often don't know what to do when faced with uncomfortable truths. Then she lowered her voice. "Charlotte, what you did was brave. Many of us have seen how Heather treats you." She hesitated again before adding quietly, "William came by Pastor Richard's office yesterday. He said you've been confused, imagining things." Her words hit me like a weight pressing on my chest. So that was their plan. Make me sound unstable so no one would believe me. "Did he bring my medical records from Dr. Lawson?" I asked steadily. "The ones from last month showing I'm perfectly healthy." Margaret looked down. "No one wants to take sides, Charlotte." I gave her a faint smile. "Thank you for the casserole," I said softly, closing the door, "and give my regards to the book club that isn't meeting tonight." The quiet returned, heavier than before. I placed the untouched casserole in the fridge and sat back down at the kitchen table, my cold tea waiting for me. My hand brushed against my purse, the one that held Heather's cruel note. I opened it and froze. The note was gone. I emptied everything onto the table: wallet, keys, tissues, nothing. It must have been taken from my purse when I left it unattended during my speech at church. Without that note, it was my word against hers. And worse, I suddenly remembered. William held medical power of attorney for me. Something I'd signed years ago after a brief hospital stay. Back then, I trusted him completely. Now, that trust felt like a weapon turned against me. For the first time, I realized Heather's nursing home joke might not have been a joke at all. It could have been a plan, one they could actually carry out. Rain began to fall outside, tapping against the roof like restless fingers. My home, once my sanctuary, suddenly felt uncertain. I was alone, being painted as confused, and possibly about to lose everything I'd worked my whole life for: my freedom, my dignity, my peace. That night, I forced myself to eat a simple dinner I could barely taste. The silence in the house felt alive, pressing in from every wall. No call from William, no apology, just the cold hum of the refrigerator and the ache of being forgotten. Then my phone buzzed, not from William, but from an unknown number. "Charlotte, this is Diane from the church choir. I saw what happened Sunday. I've been through something similar. Please call me if you want to talk. You're not alone." I stared at the message for a long time. A tiny spark of hope flickered inside me. Maybe. I wasn't completely alone. It took me 2 days to dial her number. Part of me felt like calling would mean admitting defeat, that I couldn't handle this on my own. But as William's silence stretched into its second week, I realized I needed someone who understood. We met at Rosie's Diner, a small roadside place far from the church crowd. Diane was a few years older, her silver hair cut neatly, her eyes warm but edged with wisdom born from pain. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said, stirring her coffee. "Most people don't. They try to handle it alone." "Handle what?" I asked, even though I already knew. She looked straight at me. "Emotional control, isolation. What your daughter-in-law is doing, it's textbook." Her words hung between us, quiet and steady. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. The words landed like stones in still water. For days, I'd been consumed by William's betrayal, by the heartbreak of watching my own son turn away from me. But now, hearing Diane's story, I finally recognized what was happening. "My daughter did the same thing," Diane said quietly. "It started with little comments about my memory. Then she offered to help with my finances. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a care facility, wondering how I'd lost control of my own life." My hands tightened around my coffee cup. "How did you get out?" A small, knowing smile crossed her face. "I met Greta. She runs a support group for seniors who've been through family estrangement and manipulation. She helped me understand my rights, find the right people, and most importantly, realize I wasn't alone." She slid a small card across the table. "We meet Thursdays at the community center. No pressure, but it might help." I slipped the card into my purse. I didn't promise anything, but I didn't refuse either. Then Diane's voice dropped lower. "There's something else you should know. Heather's been talking. She's telling people at church that you've been acting confused for months, that the Mother's Day moment was just another episode." My stomach sank. "And people believe her?" Diane nodded sadly. "Some do. She's very convincing, and William supports every word." The pain cut deeper than I expected. My own son, the little boy I'd raised alone after losing his father at 10, was helping dismantle my reputation and independence. "What does she want?" I whispered, though deep down I already knew. "Your house," Diane said gently. "Probably your savings too. Control. That's usually what this is about. The emotional games are just a means to an end." I thought of my modest 3-bedroom home, the one I'd bought with life insurance money after my husband passed. It wasn't fancy, but it sat in a good neighborhood, one where property values had tripled. Then there was the small inheritance from my parents, carefully saved over the years. "I should go," I said softly, overwhelmed. "Thursday, 2:00, Diane called after me. "Just think about it." The community center was a plain brick building that had seen better days. On Thursday, I sat in my car for 15 minutes, debating whether to walk in. Through the window, I saw a circle of chairs being arranged. An older woman with a bright red scarf was setting out cups of water and a plate of cookies. Finally, I drew a deep breath and stepped inside. "You must be Charlotte," the woman said, smiling warmly. "I'm Greta. Diane said you might come." Her handshake was firm, her eyes steady. "We're just getting started." There were 8 others in the circle, men and women in their 60s through 80s. Every face held traces of pain, but also resilience. As they spoke, I listened stories that mirrored my own in different ways. A son who took over his mother's bank account until she had nothing left in her name. A daughter who convinced doctors her father was incompetent so she could sell his farm. A grandson who isolated his grandmother from everyone who cared about her. Something shifted inside me. I wasn't alone. And what was happening to me wasn't unique or deserved. It was a pattern, a recognizable, fightable pattern. When my turn came, I spoke haltingly at first, then with growing confidence, as I described Heather's steady manipulation, William's silence, and my fear of losing everything. Greta listened intently. "The medical power of attorney is concerning," she said, "but fixable. We have a volunteer lawyer who helps our members with exactly these issues, and will help you get an independent evaluation to prove your mental clarity. You're going to need that documentation." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. Hope. Not just to survive, but to take back control of my own life. As the meeting ended, people exchanged numbers and hugs. An older man named Thomas pressed a small paperback into my hands, a guide to senior legal protections. "Knowledge is power," he said simply, "and you're stronger than you think." Walking back to my car, I realized something inside me had changed. The fear was still there, but beside it stood something stronger. Resolve. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I was going to fight. The next morning, I woke with more clarity than I'd felt in months. The fog was gone, replaced by purpose. My first call was to Dr. Lawson, my physician of 20 years. "Charlotte," he greeted warmly, "what can I do for you?" "I need comprehensive cognitive testing," I said firmly, "and I need it officially documented." There was a pause. "May I ask why?" I told him everything. Heather's manipulations, William's authority over my affairs, the rumors about my mind. His tone grew serious. "Come in this afternoon," he said. "We'll start immediately." My next call was to Sandra Boyd, the volunteer lawyer Greta had mentioned. She listened carefully, asking clear, pointed questions about my home, my savings, and my family dynamics. When I finished, she sighed gently. "It's more common than you think," she said, "but we can act fast. First, we revoke your son's legal authority. Then, we set up new documents with someone trustworthy in charge. You still have control, Charlotte, and we're going to make sure it stays that way." "I don't have anyone," I admitted quietly. Saying the words out loud hurt more than I expected. "You will," Sandra said gently. "That's what your support group is for, building a network of people who truly care about your well-being." By the end of that week, I had taken back more control than I thought possible. I completed a full cognitive assessment. Results: excellent. I legally revoked William's authority over my affairs, and I filed new instructions with my bank. No major changes or withdrawals could happen without my in-person approval. But the most unexpected change came not from legal papers. It came from Greta. After our second support group meeting, she handed me a colorful flyer. "The community center is looking for a mentor for their intergenerational program," she said. "Seniors working with local teens after school. I thought of you right away." "Me?" I asked, startled. "I haven't worked since I retired from teaching 5 years ago." "Exactly," she said, smiling. "You understand young people, and you have time to share. And maybe," she added softly, "it's time to build a life that isn't shaped by William or Heather." The program was housed in a bright room filled with light and laughter. Colorful artwork covered the walls, and bookshelves overflowed with supplies. 5 other mentors were already there, helping teenagers with homework, college applications, and sometimes just listening. Maria Santos, the program director, greeted me warmly. "We especially need help in our creative writing sessions," she explained. "Many of our teens struggle to express themselves. Having someone patient to guide them makes all the difference." I thought of my years teaching English, the spark in a student's eyes when they realized their words mattered. "I think I can help with that," I said, surprising even myself. That afternoon, I met Zoe, a quiet 16-year-old with bright blue hair and eyes that carried stories far beyond her years. "I hate writing," she declared as we sat down. "That's okay," I said with a smile. "We can just talk." But by the end of the hour, she had filled 3 pages about her school's unfair dress code. She didn't even notice she was writing until she stopped. "Same time next week?" she asked, pretending to sound casual. "I'll be here," I promised. As the weeks passed, my life took on a new rhythm. Mornings were for practical things, meetings with Sandra, organizing finances, documenting my independence with journals and receipts. Afternoons were for the community center, where I now worked with 5 students who groaned if I ever missed a session. Evenings, once the loneliest hours of the day, were filled with new pursuits. I joined a beginner's computer class at the library, determined to finally master the digital world that had always intimidated me. Thomas from the support group introduced me to his community garden. There, I found joy in watching green shoots push through the soil, small, living proof that growth was still possible at any age. I still thought about William every day. The ache of his absence never quite left me. Twice, I'd driven past his office, hoping for a glimpse of him, wondering if he ever thought about me at all. But the anger that had once burned so fiercely was fading. In its place was something quieter, wiser, the understanding that I had to build a life that didn't revolve around his approval. 1 month after Mother's Day, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Mom, we need to talk. Christmas dinner at our house." William. My heart raced after months of silence. A message that sounded less like an invitation and more like a command. Christmas was 6 months away, yet he spoke as if nothing had happened. My fingers hovered over the screen. The old Charlotte would have said yes immediately, grateful for any scrap of attention. But the woman I had become, the woman I was still becoming, had learned something vital. I deserve more than crumbs. I deleted the draft and set the phone aside. This wasn't a decision I needed to make today, or even this week. I had a garden to tend, a writing workshop to prepare, friends coming over for dinner, friends who saw me clearly and valued what they saw. The woman I was becoming would know exactly how to respond when the time came. The months between Mother's Day and Christmas passed in a blur of purpose and quiet joy. By December, my life looked nothing like it had before. The community center hired me part-time to oversee the writing program, now doubled in size. My garden flourished, enough to share baskets of fresh vegetables with neighbors and new friends. And encouraged by my computer instructor, I even started a small blog about independence and resilience in later life. Through it all, I thought about William's message, turning it over in my mind like a smooth stone worn down by time. After many long conversations with Greta, Diane, and the group, I made my decision. I would go to that Christmas dinner, but this time, on my own terms. I dressed carefully that morning. A deep burgundy sweater, charcoal slacks, and my mother's pearl necklace. It wasn't just jewelry, it was armor. In my purse sat a folder, my complete neurological evaluation, legal papers revoking William's authority, and photographs showing the full, independent life I'd rebuilt. As I pulled into their driveway, my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Their house glittered with Christmas lights strung from every eave, a giant inflatable Santa waving cheerfully in the front yard. Perfectly festive, perfectly excessive, perfectly Heather. William opened the door before I could knock. "Mom," he said quietly. His tone was polite, almost formal. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. The smell of pine and cinnamon filled the air. Gentle Christmas carols played from hidden speakers. Heather was seated neatly on the sofa, a velvet green dress perfectly matching the tree behind her. "Charlotte," she said, smiling that practiced smile. "So glad you could make it." I took a seat in the armchair opposite them. No hugs, no warmth, just polite distance. "It's been a long time," I said simply. William cleared his throat. "Mom, before dinner, we wanted to talk about what happened last May." He glanced at Heather, who nodded like a stage director cueing her actor. "Your behavior at church was concerning," he said carefully. "We've been worried about you." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "My behavior?" I repeated. "You mean when I responded to a note that said I was headed for a nursing home?" Heather sighed dramatically. "That's exactly what we mean, Charlotte. You completely misunderstood. It was just a harmless joke." "A joke," I echoed. I reached into my purse. "Like the one where you've been telling people I'm confused and losing touch with reality?" William shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we're just worried about your health, that's all." "Fortunately," I said calmly, "I have excellent doctors." I placed the folder on the coffee table. Dr. Lawson conducted a full neurological and cognitive evaluation in June. The results are there if you'd like to see them. Perfect scores across the board. William didn't reach for the papers. Heather's smile faltered. We've also noticed you've been making some questionable financial choices, William continued, clearly reading from a prepared script. We thought it might be time to simplify things, maybe sell the house, move somewhere with more support. William, I interrupted gently, I've already revoked your medical power of attorney, and I've added safeguards to every one of my accounts. The silence that followed was absolute. Heather's face flushed red. You've what? I've taken back control of my life, I said softly but firmly. And while I will always love you, William, I won't be controlled or dismissed again. Heather stood abruptly. This is ridiculous, William. Tell her this is ridiculous. But William just stared at me. There was surprise in his eyes, and something else. Maybe. Respect. There's something else, I continued. I've been hired as the creative writing coordinator at the community center. I was even interviewed for the local paper last week. That's wonderful, Mom, William said slowly, sounding genuinely taken aback. Heather crossed her arms. A little part-time charity work doesn't mean you're capable of— I'm not finished, I said, meeting her eyes. I've also been invited to speak at next month's conference on active aging. They were very interested in my perspective on family dynamics and independence. Heather's eyes widened. You wouldn't dare speak publicly about— About what, Heather? I asked, my tone polite, my smile calm. About how families sometimes mistake independence for incompetence, or how well-meaning relatives can unintentionally undermine someone's autonomy. It's all quite academic, really. The meaning wasn't lost on her. If they continued their campaign, I wouldn't stay quiet. William placed a hand on her arm. Let's just have dinner, he said firmly. Mom's right. We need to respect her choices. Heather's mouth opened, then closed again. She turned and stalked into the kitchen. Dinner was tense. Heather focused on her plate, cutting her turkey into tiny, silent pieces. William tried to fill the silence, asking about my garden and computer classes like someone trying to reconnect with a stranger. When I finally drove home that night, snow swirling through my headlights, I felt a mix of sadness and triumph. Something had shifted forever between us, but for the first time in years, I had stood my ground, and they had heard me. A year later, on my 66th birthday, I stood in my own living room surrounded by laughter, warmth, and colorful balloons. Greta stood by the window, laughing with Thomas as they debated tomato varieties for next spring's planting. Maria from the community center showed photos of our teens' new writing anthology, their first published collection. The air buzzed with friendship and joy. These weren't just guests. They were my chosen family, the people who'd helped me rebuild my life from the ground up. As I looked around, I realized something profound. My story hadn't ended when my son turned away. It had only just begun, the story of a woman who refused to be silenced, who reclaimed her voice, and who finally learned that independence, at any age, is not something to fear, but something to celebrate. Zoe, my blue-haired writing student, now with fresh streaks of purple, was setting out cupcakes she had baked herself, each one topped with a tiny fondant book. The sight made me smile. I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused. The woman looking back at me stood taller than she had a year ago. Her eyes were brighter, her smile genuine. She looked happy. The doorbell rang. When I opened the door, the air caught in my chest. William stood there, alone, holding a small wrapped package. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Happy birthday." For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. It had been nearly 4 months since our tense Christmas dinner, with only a few brief, polite messages between us since then. "William," I managed finally. "I wasn't expecting you." He shifted, awkward but sincere. "I should have called first. I can see you're having a party." "It's fine," I said, stepping aside. "Please, come in." As he entered, my friends noticed. Greta caught my eye and gave me a small nod of support. Zoe, who had heard plenty about my son during our writing sessions, studied him curiously. "Your house looks different," William said, glancing around. "It's nice." He was right. Over the past year, I'd transformed the place, painting the walls soft yellows and blues, trading heavy curtains for sunlight, adding shelves filled with poetry and memoirs. It wasn't just redecorated, it was reborn. "Thank you," I said. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Punch?" "Coffee would be great." In the kitchen, away from the gentle hum of conversation, William set the gift on the counter and took a deep breath. "Mom," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. A big one." I busied myself pouring coffee, giving him space to speak. "Heather and we're separated," he continued. "Have been for about 2 months." I turned, surprised. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," he said, managing a sad smile. "It was a long time coming. After Christmas, I started to see things more clearly. The way she spoke about you, the way she tried to control everything. I realized it wasn't just about you, it was about me too." I handed him the cup. Our fingers brushed briefly. "What happened?" I asked gently. He sighed, rubbing a hand through his hair. "I found emails, messages with a real estate agent about your house. She'd been getting estimates, planning a quick sale, even drafting documents that would have given us control of your assets. She thought I could convince you to sign them." I didn't react outwardly. Deep down, I had suspected as much. Still, hearing it confirmed stung more than I expected. "When I confronted her," William said quietly, "she didn't even deny it. She said it was for your own good, that I needed to be a man and handle my mother. That's when I knew I had to leave." I leaned against the counter, letting his words sink in. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said softly. "I'm the one who should be sorry," he replied. "I let her come between us. I believed her when she said you were slipping, even though everything I knew about you told me otherwise. I failed you." That simple admission, the truth I had waited so long to hear, felt like a key turning in a long-locked door. "I've missed you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I've missed my mom." Before I could respond, Zoe appeared in the doorway. "Charlotte, everyone's waiting for you to blow out your candles," she said, her eyes darting between us. "I'll be right there," I promised. Then I turned to William. "Will you stay?" He hesitated. "Are you sure? This is your day with your friends. I don't want to intrude." "You won't be intruding," I said softly. "But things are different now. I'm different." He smiled faintly. "I can see that. You seem stronger, happier." "I am," I said, nodding. "I've built a life I love, William. A life that's mine. If you want to be part of it, I'd welcome that, but it has to be based on mutual respect." He nodded slowly. "I understand, and I want to try." We rejoined the celebration together. I introduced William to my friends, my new circle, my chosen family. When Thomas told one of his funny gardening stories, William laughed freely. When Maria talked about our teen writing program, he asked thoughtful questions. And when Zoe, ever the skeptic, shyly admitted she wanted to study architecture in college, William's face lit up. "I'd love to show you some of my firm's projects," he told her warmly. Later, when the candles had been blown out and the room buzzed with contentment, William and I stepped out onto the back porch. The sunset blazed across the sky in shades of orange and rose. "You never opened your gift?" he said suddenly, remembering the small package. I unwrapped it carefully and felt my breath catch. Inside was a silver frame holding a faded photograph I hadn't seen in years. Me, holding 5-year-old William on my lap, both of us laughing over a picture book. "I found it while packing my things," he said quietly. "It reminded me of who we used to be, and maybe who we could be again." I traced the edge of the frame, emotion rising in my throat. "I'd like that," I whispered, "but it will take time." "I have time," he said simply. We stood there as the stars began to appear, the air cool and still around us, and I thought about the year that had changed everything. From humiliation to liberation, From isolation to belonging, from fear to strength. The Mother's Day bouquet that had once carried cruelty had, in its own strange way, become the start of my rebirth. I had lost the safety of blind trust, but I had gained something far greater: self-reliance, true friendship, a purpose that no one could ever take away. And maybe, just maybe, I was gaining back a son who finally saw me for who I truly was. "Happy birthday, Mom," William said softly beside me. And for the first time in a very long time, it truly was.